Let's continue our conversation now with Jim Gulliford, who is Regional Administrator for EPA Region 7. And, of course, the other two big issues that we've been dealing with and working up to, waters of the U.S. and water in general. There's been probably a contentious relationship, I would think, with water, EPA, and then some of the stakeholders.
Well, one of our priorities in this administration is to provide clarity as to what the real outreach of the jurisdictional waters of the U.S. ought to be. And EPA is in the process right now of developing a rule which will explain that, make it very certain it won't reach as far. Clearly, it doesn't reach beyond, I think, what Congress intended to be the navigable waters and those immediately adjacent to them. In other words, to make sure that those processes are protected, but at the same time that we don't step too far into the private rights of growers and ranchers across the country. So look for a rule proposal. We'll take public comment on that. One of the things that we've committed to is a transparent process where all interests are heard, but we hope that we'll be able to give farmers and ranchers a clearer definition of what waters of the U.S. are so that they understand if they're planting something on their property, on their land, that they'll know whether it's subject to those rules or not.
The announcement's been made. It's a work in progress to bring E15 year-round.
Yes.
There's a little trepidation by some say, will it get done in time to really to meet the peaks and so on. Kind of give us an update on that process of what's going on at EPA.
Sure. The President instructed EPA to develop a rule to authorize the use of E15, as you say, year-round. And so the agency will go through that same rulemaking process because we have to build the justification for it, why it's safe, why it's healthy, why it doesn't affect air quality, those types of things, so that we can defend a rule and make sure that we don't propose something that gets challenged and rolled back. And hopefully then by early summer, we'll have a rule, again, authorizing year-round use of E15.
We talked a little about water. Let's step back a little bit, and in our remaining little minute here or so, the CAFO's, confined animal feeding operations, a few years ago, that was a big issue. It's still something of concern, but most producers, most operators are doing their best to fall within those guidelines.
Sure. In our livestock industries, both the CAFOs for whether we're talking cattle, swine, poultry, all of them, they pretty well do understand what their responsibilities are. And we find that way of producing livestock or producing protein across the landscape is one that can be very environmentally friendly. It can work out. We have very few releases, very few problems. And one of the things that we're just doing now, just within the last week, again, we proposed a rule that will eliminate the requirement under EPA, which is the Emergency Planning Citizen Right to Know Act, that farmers and livestock producers will no longer have to report emissions from their CAFO facilities. This is a real positive thing, both for the producer, because it's a burden, an unnecessary burden on them, but secondly for the emergency responders, because they don't need that information anyway. They're worried about accidents and emergencies. They're not worried about the routine, day-to-day emissions that come from livestock facilities.
Right.
So again, we think this is takes some of the burden, unnecessary burden from agriculture, and makes it more certain that farmers understand and ranchers understand what the requirements are.
Super. Thanks for the update. Appreciate it.
Very good.
Jim Gulliford, who is the Regional Administrator for EPA Region 7, has joined us. We'll have more coming up.